Period 2-3 Core, Mrs. Nagori.
Narration by Rochelle Laval
and Sarah Howie.
Religion played a very important role in the Aztecs' lives and was very complicated because they adopted many aspects of the people that they conquered. Art also had a part in the religion. The Aztec scribes and priests drew pictures that told about their gods and recorded religious events with hieroglyphics and even number symbols.
The social class structure for the Aztecs went from nobles to commoners to serfs and then to slaves. Nobles had their own private land received from the government for serving in government projects. Commoners were the majority of the population, and they usually farmed. Serfs worked on the land held by nobles. Serfs were tied to the land and couldn't leave without permission from the nobles. Slaves were considered property, but their children were born free. Slaves were often captured in war, or they were criminals. Slaves could also be people who couldn't pay debts. Laws for the Aztecs were very strict. Rebellious or lazy children were held over a fire made of chili peppers and were forced to breathe in clouds of smoke. This was called flogged. Another common punishment was putting cactus spines in their flesh. There were different rules for each class. If you were a commoner and you stole, you were sold into slavery. A noble man was put to death. If you were a commoner and you got drunk, your head was shaved and house was destroyed. If you were a nobleman and you were caught drunk, you were executed. If you wore clothes from a different class, you were executed as well. There were two types of courts for the Aztecs. There was the high court, called Chinahuacol, which was in second rank to the king. Commoners had a local small court.
Aztec religion is based on the worship of many different gods and goddesses, some of whom had been known for a very long time in the Valley of Mexico. Others were adopted from other conquered people, and by the reign of Montezuma II, the imported gods have become so numerous that a special temple had to be built for them to close the shrine in Huitzilopochtli, in their capital. The priests and philosophers tried to present these foreign deities as aspects of already existing gods, and in this way to assimilate them into the national pantheon. But popular belief worked in the other direction, treating gods as in their own right to the priests were simply different manifestations of the same god. The Aztecs were polytheistic people, meaning they believed in multiple gods. The Aztecs worshipped hundreds of divinities, each who ruled one or more human activities or aspect of nature. The Aztec economy was based on farming, so they had plenty of agricultural divinities. Some of these gods included Tlaloc, a rain god, and Xipe Totec, who was associated with springtime and regrowth. In Aztec mythology, Xipe Totec, or our Lord the Flayed One, was a life-death rebirth deity, god of agriculture, the West, disease, spring, goldsmiths, and the seasons. He flayed himself to give food to humanity, symbolic of the maize seed losing the outer layer of the seed before germination. Without his skin, he was depicted as a golden god. Other gods included Tezcatlipoca, an all-powerful divinity. The Aztecs believed that 4 suns had been created in 4 previous ages, and all of them died at the end of each cosmic era. This is where Tonatiuh, the sun god, came in. Tonatiuh is said to be the 5th sun and represents the era that's still his. Tonatiuh was in charge of the Aztec heaven called Tolan. Only dead warriors and women who died in childbirth could be received in Tolan. Tonatiuh was responsible for supporting the universe. To prevent the end of the world, Aztecs believed it was essential to maintain the strength of the sun god by offering him human sacrifices. Mixtlantecuhtli, ruler of the dead, and Hitliquay, the fire god in Aztec mythology, were also very important. Hitliquay was a personification of life after death, warmth and cold, light and darkness, and food during famine. He was usually depicted with a red or yellow face and a censer on his head. At the end of the Aztec century, the gods were thought to be able to end their covenant with humanity. Feasts were held in honor of Hitliquay to keep his favors, and human sacrifices were burned after removing their heart. Quetzalcoatl was a god associated with civilization and learning. Each town or village had its own god, and each class or profession had its own patron. The Aztecs had many rituals and ceremonies, most of which were done to keep the gods happy. They had many religious ceremonies, the most of which were observed by planting, harvesting, and other events in the agricultural year. Human sacrifice played an important role in Aztec religion. The Aztecs would perform the sacrifice by slashing open the chest of the victim and tearing out the heart. They would perform this act upon a pyramid in front of a temple. The Aztecs believed gods needed human blood and hearts to remain strong. The reasons the Aztecs wished to keep the gods happy was because they believed if they were unhappy, the world would come to an end. The purpose of many of these ceremonies was to ensure the good crops by winning the favor of the gods. Aztecs also celebrated a new fire ceremony, also called the binding up of the years. In Aztec religion, this was celebrated every 52 years when the 260-day ritual and 365-day civil calendars returned to the same positions relative to each other. In preparation, all sacred and domestic fires were allowed to burn out. At the climax of the ceremony, priests ignited a new sacred fire on the breast of the sacrificial victim, from which the rest of the people rekindled their hearth fires. The people then began feasting.
Temples of the Aztecs were usually rectangular. The temples were usually 380 by 330 feet wide. There were 3 causeways that led to 3 gates. The gates had sculptures of important gods in their culture. Inside the temple was a skull rack of sacrifice victims. There were storage buildings, priest quarters, and rooms for fasting and penance inside the temple. Schools for the training of young priests were inside the temple as well. There were 2 shrines for Taului and Huitzilopochtli. The shrines were on top of the pyramid. Temples dedicated to the wind god were usually round. Inside the temple, there was also a ball court for Poktapokt.